Welcome. I'm Leslie Juvin-Acker. You know me as the leadership coach and expert career strategist who delivers weekly career advice from Malachi's Picks. Join me for an inside look as I explore the subjects of leadership, career advancement, and work-life balance with today's lifestyle industry disruptors and innovators. Now on Drive.
Today on this episode of Drive, we're in Oceanside, California at the iconic barn of Larry Balma, skateboard industry pioneer, co-founder of Tracker Trucks and Transworld Media, and now author of Tracker, 40 Years of Skateboard History. Step inside with me as Larry shares what it takes to succeed as a leader and how 40 years of skateboard history reveals lessons you can use to advance your own lifestyle career. Now on this episode of Drive. Welcome everyone, today on this episode of Drive here at Larry Balma's barn. Thanks for joining us, Larry, on this episode.
Well, thank you for taking the time to show off our Tracker 40 Years of Skateboard History. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, we're happy to be here today. Larry, you're one of the most influential businessmen in skateboarding. Tracker was just recently, last year, recognized with the Icon Award at the Skateboarding Hall of Fame. What part of the evolution of the business of skateboarding sticks out to you the most?
It's probably the relationships with employees, with job shop owners, all the skaters families. I try and put myself into other people's shoes and look out, what do they see and where are we going, and you learn something every day. One thing about the business is that we spend more of our waking hours at work than anything else in our life. Mm-hmm. And so if you can surround yourself with people that you like to be with, and you make a product that you're proud of, it's just the best thing. You love your work, you're going to be successful and live a happy life.
Larry, you've hired over 1,000 people in your career at Tracker and as co-founder of Transworld Media. What advice do you have for leaders when it comes to recognizing and nurturing talent?
Well, most of the time when people get in front of me, they've already been qualified to be able to do the job. And so I'm trying to read their self-confidence level, and one thing I found out that's most important is that they need to have a sense of humor.
Humor?
Well, because humor is being self-confident. You have to be able to laugh at yourself. We're a team, and you have to be able to have this sense of humor to be able to drop in and fit with the team. Because if you can't work as a team employee, it isn't going to work, no matter how brilliant you are in that one little focus.
So how do you nurture that humor, that sense of self-confidence in the business realm?
I think people either have it or they don't, or they just gain the experience and gain that self-confidence as they're working.
Right. So it's not necessarily up to the boss, but it's up to the individual worker themselves.
Yes.
So personal responsibility and taking a look at yourself.
It's something you grow up with. I mean, yeah, you go through high school and the other kids pick on you or whatever. Well, you got to man up and be able to take it, because otherwise you're going to have trouble going through life.
Right, standing up for yourself, knowing your own boundaries, being able to know your place in the group context.
I think in action sports, whether we're snowboarders or surfers or skateboarders, we probably get that drilled into us or we're not in that sport.
Right. So it's, in terms of the action sports industry, being self-confident and having a sense of humor is a part of the gig.
You bet.
So Larry, you and I have discussed risk personally. You're a commercial fisherman, and you have witnessed some of your friends who have gambled, risking their lives, and some of them ultimately losing their lives. What advice do you have for today's entrepreneur when it comes to taking risk in business?
As a commercial fisherman, you leave the shoreline and you're out there 100 miles or whatever in the ocean or more. You're on your own. And you're making decisions that are life and death decisions all the time.
Right.
And maybe the first decision is about saving your gear or your nets or your boat, but ultimately it's life and death, and you're making these decisions several times a day probably. When you come back to the beach and we're building trucks and okay, yeah, we're making decisions which way to go, but they're money decisions. They're not life and death decisions. So I learned risk versus reward based on life and death decisions, and now it was a lot easier to make those decisions in business. But I have that logic of risk reward from being a fisherman to keep me in perspective.
Larry, thank you so much for inviting me and all the Malachi.com viewers on this episode of Drive, and for sharing your amazing story with Tracker 40 Years of Skateboard History.
Leslie, thank you so much for coming out here and sharing our Tracker book with all your readers. It's been a great experience.
And for me too. Thanks, Larry.
Thanks for joining me on this episode of Drive, brought to you by Malachi.com, Carrasco Creative Media, and me, your career coach, Leslie Juvin-Acker. Charge your career, and see you here next time on Drive.
Preview and purchase your own copy of Tracker 40 Years of Skateboard History, and read complete Tracker team interviews at trackerhistory.com. Do you or someone you know have an inspirational leadership story? Reach out to us at my Malachi profile and connect with me. We would love to tell your story. For additional career advice and extended Drive conversations, join us on the Drive page at Malachi.com. Be a part of the community and put your career in Drive.